What would you do if you were the last human in a city-sized room and every single alien thought you were a joke? That was my new reality in the Galactic Council Chamber, a swirling abyss where 73 species floated in pods, all ranked by who was toughest. 1,000 languages of clicks, growls, and whistles were all magically translated, but the message was always the same. Humanity was the punchline. And right in the middle of this cosmic joke stood Ambassador Sarah Chen. In her simple gray suit, she looked like a tourist who'd taken a very wrong turn. From their floating thrones, the council members didn't even try to hide their laughter. The translator just kept repeating that one word, laughter, as 1,000 pairs of weird alien eyes stared down at her. She had just finished delivering Earth's official declaration, and to these ancient godlike beings, it was the funniest thing they'd heard in a century. "Okay, hold on. Let me get this right," chirped the speaker, a bird-like alien named Tom Von, his 3-part beak clicking. "Your people, who just figured out star travel 80 years ago, want to block off a no-fly zone that's 50 light-years wide around your tiny little sun? That's the heart of our announcement?" "Yes," Chen said. Her voice was so calm, so steady, it was almost creepy. There wasn't a hint of the terror that should have been there. "And you honestly believe," Tom Von squawked, his voice practically dripping with scorn, "that every race in this room will actually listen to this little keep-out sign of yours?" "We expect all ships to respect the boundary," Chen stated, her composure like a wall of steel. That single sentence sent the whole chamber into chaos. The translators went nuts trying to process the flood of hoots, howls, and roars of disbelief. A few of the warrior races looked like she had just spit on a picture of their grandma. But Ambassador Chen just waited, perfectly still. She held the speaker's gaze, her hands folded neatly behind her, letting the tidal wave of mockery just wash right over her. After a long moment, Tom Von flapped a wing for silence. The noise faded, but the air was still thick with contempt. "Ambassador," he said, "your species has a grand total of 12 colonies. 12. The Zitharan Empire next to me controls 47 star systems. The Marine Collective has settled 300 worlds. The youngest race here, other than you, has been in space for 600 years. By what power do you make such an insane demand?" "It's not a demand," Chen corrected him gently. "It's an announcement." "That's a meaningless word game," a new voice boomed, a deep rumble that made the floor vibrate. "So are you announcing this to us, or are you threatening us, little human?" Every head in the room turned toward the Zitharan pod. High Commander Velkoth's image appeared, a massive, 4-armed giant covered in what looked like natural battleship armor. The Zitharans were known for crushing entire civilizations, not for having polite conversations. "We are threatening no one," Chen said, turning to face his screen directly. "We are establishing a border, and we are politely asking you to respect it." "Ask?" Velkoth's huge mandibles cracked open in a terrifying smile. "You are in no position to ask for anything. You're standing before the most powerful beings in the known universe, declaring a massive chunk of space off limits. And we're all supposed to just, what? Tip our hats and say, 'Yes, ma'am?'" "Yes," Chen said, and that one tiny word cut through the room like a knife. The High Commander let out a laugh that sounded like 2 mountains grinding together. "And what if we say no? Are your 12 little planets going to declare war on the entire galaxy?" "We truly hope it doesn't come to that," she replied. "Hope." Velkoth seemed to swell, filling the screen with his immense size. "Let me tell you what I think of your hope, human. The Zitharan Empire has turned species with technology you can't even imagine into space dust. We have dismantled fleets 10 times the size of yours, and you have the nerve to tell us where we can and cannot go?" Chen's calm, patient expression didn't even flicker. "Commander Velkoth, I must strongly advise you, you will advise nothing." His roar was so loud it literally shook the platform she was standing on. "The main trade route between our worlds and the outer systems goes right through your little no-go zone. We've used that route for 3,000 years. Do you honestly think we are going to reroute our entire armada because some toddler species that still uses chemical rockets asked nicely? The route could be slightly altered, Chen suggested. "It would add only about 6 days to your journey. A small price to pay when you consider the alternative." "The alternative to what?" Velkoth sneered. "The alternative where the mighty Zithran Empire is forced to take the scenic route around your pathetic little home?" He spread all 4 of his huge arms wide. "No, Ambassador, we will not be changing our course. In fact, I think it's about time someone taught humanity its place in this galaxy." A cold, dead silence fell over the chamber. Even the aliens who had been laughing a minute ago were now completely frozen. This wasn't a joke anymore. When a Zitharan High Commander talked about teaching lessons, it meant warships were already powering up. "Commander," Tom Von the speaker began, "perhaps this could be handled with more—" "This discussion is over," Velkoth snapped. "In 3 of your Earth months, the Zitharan Trade Armada will travel its normal route, directly through this human space. If you humans have an issue with that, you are more than welcome to try and stop us. I have a feeling you'll learn a very valuable lesson about why newcomers should be seen and not heard." And with that, his screen went black. His pod was dark, but Chen was still standing there, like a statue in the eye of a hurricane. Whispers erupted all around her. A few of the older, wiser species actually looked worried by the Zitharan's threat. Others looked excited, like they were getting front-row seats to a public execution. A few just stared at Chen with pure pity. "Ambassador Chen," Tom Von said, all the humor gone from his voice, "the Council has no authority over a sovereign empire. If the Zitharan fleet enters your space, we will do nothing to stop them. And just so we're clear, any hostile action you take against them will be considered an act of war. Earth will be completely on its own." "We understand the situation perfectly," Chen replied. "Are you certain you do?" A soft, ancient voice whispered from one of the highest pods. It was Ambassador Creel of the Vorten Collective, a being who was thousands of years old. "Commander Velkoth does not bluff. That trade fleet will be escorted by at least 200 capital-class warships." "And your entire military has, what, 40 ships? I've seen the intelligence files. Your weapons are weak and your shields are like paper." 37 ships are combat-ready, Chen corrected her, her voice perfectly level. "Then you must know this is suicide," Creel said, her tone softening, almost as if she were trying to be kind. "Take back your declaration, apologize to the Zitharans, offer them a tribute. It is not too late to prevent this." Chen just slowly shook her head. "The declaration will stand." "Then your people are doomed," Creel stated flatly. "You are like children playing with fire. I've seen empires far greater than yours burn to nothing because of pride. The Zitharans will show you no mercy." "We are not asking for mercy." "Then what are you asking for?" Creel pressed, completely baffled. "No one starts a fight they know they can't win unless they are after something else." For the first time, something new flickered across Chen's face. It was a cold, hard glint in her eyes that made a few of the ambassadors closest to her physically lean away. "We want to be left alone," she said, her voice dropping to a low whisper that somehow carried through the entire chamber. "That is all we have ever wanted. We spent 10,000 years nearly destroying ourselves. We finally got our act together. We looked to the stars for a peaceful future, and in just 80 years, we've been invaded twice. Our freighters have been raided 7 times, and 3 of our colonies have been bullied by galactic mobsters who see us as an easy payday because we're the new kids." Her voice never rose, but every word landed like a body blow. "We're tired," she continued, "tired of being the galaxy's doormat, tired of being shoved around. We are done trying to prove we come in peace. So we are drawing a line, a very clear line, and we are telling all of you as politely as we can, do not cross it." "Or what?" It was Velkoth. His pod had lit back up. He'd been listening the whole time. "What will you do, little human? Your weapons are toys. Your shields are a joke. Your ships are slow. What could you possibly do to the Zitharan Empire?" Chen turned to face his pod one last time. "We've told you what we want, Commander. We've shown you where our line is. The choice to cross it is entirely yours." She took a steadying breath, her words ringing out in the dead silence. "Don't say we didn't give you a heads up." With a brief nod to Speaker Tom Von, she spun on her heel and walked away, the sound of her shoes the only thing moving in that vast, shocked chamber. "Pathetic," Velkoth hissed into the quiet. 3 months, human. we'll see just how serious your little warning really is. And maybe, he added, after we take a little tour through your precious territory, your species will finally learn some humility." Chen reached the colossal doorway but never looked back. 3 months, she confirmed, her voice barely a whisper. And then she vanished. For a full minute, no one spoke. Tom Vaughn finally cleared his throat. "Are there any other matters?" "Wait," Ambassador Creel cut him off. "She said they were telling us something. What were they telling us? What is actually inside that zone?" But there was no one left to answer. Can you imagine being told the biggest bully in the galaxy is about to steamroll you? And your only line of defense is a single tiny ship with no weapons? That was the crazy spot humanity was in, and it all kicked off because one alien ambassador tried to warn everybody. If you think this is a wild ride, subscribe now so you don't miss what happens next. At a massive galactic council meeting, a place that's usually full of noise, you could hear a pin drop. Ambassador Yolen, from a race so ancient they viewed everyone else as toddlers, got to his feet. He almost never spoke, so this was huge. "I wish to say something," his voice filled the hall. "I've been studying the humans. It's a small hobby of mine," he clarified, his eyes fixed on the most notorious warlords in the assembly. "I've examined their entire history, their art, their philosophies. I've observed their development." He let that hang in the air for a moment, and his next words landed like stones. "And I believe we should all proceed with extreme caution." A hulking, arrogant commander named Velkoth actually chuckled. "Caution about what? What's so special about them?" Yolen paused to think. "Well," he began, "they are a species that spent 90% of its existence at war with itself. They developed weapons capable of cracking their own planet open and pointed them at each other. They engineered plagues in labs that could have wiped them all out. They discovered how to poison their own atmosphere and boil their oceans, and yet, defying all logic, they survived. On dozens of occasions, they stood right on the cliff's edge of total self-annihilation," Yolen continued, "and every single time, something pulled them back." Velkoth grunted, clearly irritated. "Get to the point." "My point, Commander," Yolen said, his voice suddenly sharp, "is that for thousands of years, humans have perfected one skill above all others, discovering creative and brutally effective methods of destruction. Now that they have finally achieved peace among themselves, one must ask, where is all of that terrifying creativity being directed now?" "It's being directed at building colonies and faster ships, what else?" Velkoth sneered. "I'm not exactly trembling in my armor." "Perhaps you should be," Yolen answered quietly. "Commander, when a human gives you a warning, it is not a threat. It's a courtesy. It's their way of informing you that they've already decided what they're going to do when you ignore it. That's simply how they process things." Velkoth's loud laughter echoed through the chamber. "Let them plan. I'm eager to see what they've prepared. Did they build 40 ships instead of 37? Did they increase their shield strength by 5%? It's laughable." He slammed a fist on his console, severing the connection and ending the discussion. The council meeting dissolved shortly after. As the ambassadors left, they murmured about the tense exchange. The common opinion was that humanity, the new species on the galactic stage, was getting a little ahead of itself. A few expressed pity for the human colonies that were about to be vaporized. Figures like Yolen voiced their worries privately, but no one was really paying attention. In 3 months, the colossal Zetheran trade fleet was set to arrive right at humanity's border. 300 warships, the biggest fleet the Empire had assembled in a generation. Velkoth framed it as a demonstration, a display of power the galaxy would talk about for ages. He was right about that part, just not for the reasons he imagined. The Zetheran armada showed up at the rendezvous point 3 days early. Commander Velkoth always enjoyed making a grand entrance, and this was his masterpiece. 300 warships floated in the silent darkness, a swarm of glowing metallic predators. Their running lights formed a brand new, deadly constellation against the pitch-black canvas of space. Each vessel was a monster, engineered for nothing but destruction and clad in armor so thick it could shrug off most conventional attacks. Every last ship in that fleet had enough firepower to reduce a small moon to a cloud of dust. Velkoth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the dominant Will, admiring his armada on the main view screen. A wave of immense pride washed over him. This was the very definition of power. This was the same force that had brought 47 star systems to their knees. And now, he was about to unleash it to teach some arrogant humans a lesson. "All ships are reporting ready, Commander," his tactical officer said. "Perfect." Velkoth lowered himself into his custom-built command chair, which was made to accommodate his massive four-armed body. "Broadcast my announcement on all frequencies. I want the entire sector to hear this." The communications officer tapped her console and nodded. "All frequencies are open, sir. Anyone within 30 light-years will receive it." Velkoth leaned forward, his voice a low, authoritative rumble. "This is High Commander Velkoth of the Zethran Empire, addressing all craft in this region. The fleet you now see will proceed along our ancient trade route, which unfortunately cuts through territory that the humans have foolishly laid claim to. We are taking this action to make one thing crystal clear. Newcomers do not dictate terms to their elders. The Zethran Empire goes where it pleases, whenever it pleases. Any effort to interfere will be seen as an act of war and will be met with the complete and overwhelming power of this armada. That is not a threat, it is simply a statement of fact." He ended the broadcast with a sharp chop of his hand. "Set our course," he commanded. "Standard formation and run continuous scanner sweeps. I want to know if so much as a single human ship is out there waiting for us." The entire fleet began to move as one entity, hundreds of vessels turning in perfect synchronization and accelerating toward the edge of human-controlled space. The spectacle was both magnificent and horrifying. Velkoth had deliberately chosen a path that carved directly through the center of the human exclusion zone. He didn't want to give them any wiggle room, any way to claim he had just drifted off course. No, this was a deliberate march right through their front yard, daring them to say a word about it. The journey to the border lasted 6 hours. Velkoth spent the time reviewing assault plans. He doubted a fight would happen, but if the humans were foolish enough to start something, he wanted the retaliation to be instantaneous and devastating. A swift, brutal smackdown would serve as a much better lesson than just flying by. "Commander," the sensor officer's voice cut through the quiet, "we are approaching the border coordinates that the humans transmitted." "Anything out there?" Velkoth asked. "No, sir. Scanners are completely clean, just empty space. No ships, no stations, not even a single defense marker. It's a total void out here." Velkoth felt a surge of smug satisfaction, tinged with a tiny bit of disappointment. He'd been right. The humans were all bluff. Still, a small piece of him had been hoping for a bit of a show, a chance to demonstrate what his fleet could do. "Maintain course," he ordered. The armada drifted silently across the invisible boundary that the humans called their territory. Velkoth made sure to log the exact time. He wanted the official records to show the precise moment the Zethran Empire proved to the galaxy that human declarations were utterly meaningless. The space on the other side of the line was identical to the space before it. Same stars, same deep blackness. The human exclusion zone was nothing more than empty, harmless vacuum. "Stay on this heading," Velkoth said. "How long until we're through this zone?" "At our current velocity, approximately 8 days, Commander," the navigator replied. "Very well. I want full scanner sweeps every 10 minutes. If a single human vessel so much as flickers on our screens, I want to be notified immediately." The first 3 hours passed with absolutely nothing happening. The fleet pressed deeper into the zone, maintaining its flawless, intimidating formation. Velkoth took a leisurely walk around the bridge of his flagship. The crew remained at high alert, though it was beginning to feel like a pointless exercise. Back in his chair, the tactical display showed 300 perfect green icons gliding through enemy space without a single concern. Velkoth permitted himself a small, smug smile. This would be a day to remember. It would go down in history as the day the Zethran Empire demonstrated to the entire galaxy that humanity's warnings were nothing but hot air. Right at that moment, the sensor officer spoke up. "Commander, I have a contact, a single, very small vessel on an approach from galactic north. Velkoth rushed over to the sensor station. What type of ship? It's definitely human, sir. The engine signature matches their designs. Based on its mass, I'd say it's a science vessel, not a warship. And sir, it's not showing any shields. A science vessel? Velkoth grumbled, perplexed. Put it on the main screen. The comms officer flipped a few controls. They're responding to our hail, Commander. On screen now. The massive view screen lit up, displaying the bridge of a tiny ship. It was so small and cluttered it looked more like a broom closet than a command center, especially compared to Velkoth's own spacious bridge. A human woman in a plain work jumpsuit stood on the view screen, looking completely unfazed. Behind her, about 4 other crew members were busy at their posts. "This is Captain Maria Torres of the research vessel Cassandra," she stated, her voice as calm and even as if she were ordering lunch. "You are illegally trespassing in a sovereign exclusion zone belonging to Earth. Turn your fleet around this instant. This is your only warning." Velkoth just stared at the screen, utterly baffled. A small snort escaped him, which quickly erupted into a deep, rolling laugh. All around him, his bridge crew joined in. "My only warning?" he repeated, wiping a tear of laughter from his eye. "Captain, take a look at your display. I command 300 warships. A single one of them could reduce your little tin can to space dust with one shot. And you're warning me?" On the main screen, Captain Torres just gave a slow, deliberate nod. "I see your fleet, Commander. It's quite impressive, but I'm still asking you to turn around." "Or what?" Commander Velkoth's good humor was fading fast. "What is your tiny little science ship going to do? Give us a stern lecture?" "I'm not going to do a thing," Torres said, her voice solid as a bulkhead. "But if you continue on this course, something else will. Please, Commander, go back. Just take the long route. It'll add, 6 days to your journey? That's a small price to pay for avoiding a conflict." "The only price being paid today," Velkoth growled, "is for your own arrogance. You have 30 seconds to move your vessel, or we will move it for you." For just a split second, Torres closed her eyes. When she opened them again, Velkoth saw something in her expression that he never, ever expected to see. It wasn't fear. It wasn't defiance. It was a deep, overwhelming sadness. "Then I am truly sorry," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry we failed to convince you. I'm sorry for what is about to happen to you and everyone under your command. And most of all, I'm sorry we tried so hard to find another solution, but you've given us no other choice." 20 seconds, Velkoth snapped, his patience completely gone. "My crew and I, we all signed up for this mission," Torres explained, her words beginning to tumble out. "We all put our names forward, fully aware of the risks. We even drew straws to see who would have the honor of being the last voice you heard, the last person to try and warn you away. I won." 10 seconds. "Our families have already been notified. They're proud of what we're doing. We all recorded final messages. In mine, I said, 'Fire,' Velkoth ordered. The weapons officer slammed a single button. A brilliant lance of superheated plasma tore across the blackness between the warship and the tiny vessel. In the blink of an eye, the small research ship, which made no effort to evade, simply ceased to exist in a silent, dazzling burst of light. They thought they had just swatted a fly, but what they had actually done was step on a cosmic tripwire. You're going to want to see how this one little ship managed to bring an entire armada to its knees without firing a single weapon. "Resume our course," Commander Velkoth said from his chair. But he felt no triumph, just a cold, creeping unease. The human captain's final words were ringing in his ears. She had been so serene, so accepting of her fate, as if her own ship's destruction was just the first move in a much, much bigger game. He forced the thought from his mind. The Cassandra was a pest, a gnat. Destroying it was meaningless. He barked, "All ships maintain formation. Proceed as planned." The armada of 300 warships surged ahead, passing directly through the spot in space where a human ship had been vaporized just moments earlier. 2 hours passed, then 3. Velkoth stayed on the bridge, cycling his crew out for breaks. Something felt profoundly wrong, but he couldn't figure out what it was. Space was just black, silent, and empty. The ship's top-of-the-line scanners showed absolutely nothing. Every system on every single ship was reporting peak performance. And yet, sir, the sensor officer said, her voice tinged with confusion, I am getting something. It's not a ship, it's not physical. It's just some very unusual readings. Explain unusual. I don't know if I can, Commander. The sensors are picking up ripples in space-time itself. They aren't a threat, just strange. It's like space itself is humming. A localized gravitational distortion, Velkoth offered. A natural occurrence. Perhaps, she replied, sounding doubtful, but I've never encountered one like this. It's almost... She stopped, her eyes going wide as she stared at her console. Sir, it's pacing us. The readings are maintaining a fixed position relative to our entire fleet, moving right along with us. That sent a jolt of real alarm through Velkoth. How is that possible? I have absolutely no idea, sir. Are we in any danger? I don't believe so. The readings are extremely faint. Whatever it is, it's not affecting our systems. It's just following us. Velkoth made a call. Push the scanner power to maximum. I want a full breakdown of this phenomenon and broadcast a message to the entire fleet. I want to know if anyone else is seeing this. The responses came pouring in within minutes. Every last ship in the Armada was detecting the exact same thing. This weird, invisible ripple in the fabric of space was surrounding them, a ghostly bubble that shadowed their every move. Could it be a fleet-wide sensor malfunction? Velkoth asked, searching for any logical answer. Across 300 ships, sir, all using different sensor packages from various manufacturers? The statistical probability of that is effectively zero. So what in the stars was it? Nobody knew. The fleet pressed forward, but the strange readings persisted. They never intensified, never faded. They just hovered around the Armada like a silent, invisible shroud that perfectly copied every course correction and every change in speed. Over the next few hours, other minor issues began to surface. Tiny glitches in the navigation computers, short, unexplained power flickers, and communication lags that should have been instantaneous. Nothing was critical, nothing that would typically raise any red flags, but the sheer volume of these little problems created a thick cloud of anxiety that slowly seeped into every ship. Velkoth commanded a full diagnostic of every system on his flagship. The results came back totally clean. The ship's main computer insisted that everything was operating perfectly. But the glitches continued, as if some unseen trickster was messing with their tech in a way their own diagnostic tools couldn't detect. "Commander," his communications officer called out, her voice strained with stress. "It's the Relentless, a destroyer on the fleet's outer edge. They've gone completely quiet." Velkoth swiveled his chair to face her. "What do you mean, quiet?" "They're not responding to any of our calls, sir. Their ship icon is still on our tactical display, holding flawless formation, but all we're getting is static." "Are we being jammed?" "No indication of any jamming signals, sir. The channel is clear. They're just not picking up." A cold knot of dread began to form in Velkoth's stomach. "Signal the two ships nearest to the Relentless. Order them to get a visual confirmation. I want eyes on that ship now." He waited, his gaze glued to the tactical map. The Relentless sailed on, its little green icon holding its place in the formation without a hint of trouble. Its engines were active. Its systems appeared to be at 100%. So why was no one answering the comms? "Sir," the officer said, her voice now trembling, "the two ships we dispatched to check on the Relentless, they've gone dark as well." The cold dread in Velkoth's stomach turned into a block of solid ice. "How many?" "Two of them, sir. Both destroyers, the Iron Fang and the Stormbreaker. They were approaching to get a visual on the Relentless. Both of them went silent about 30 seconds ago." Velkoth stared at the map. 3 ships, all displaying green, fully operational status icons, were now totally unreachable. "Are they still moving?" "Yes, sir. Holding formation perfectly." "Then who is flying them?" The question echoed across the silent bridge, and nobody had an answer. Velkoth made a decision he knew he might live to regret. "Halt the fleet! All ships, full stop, immediately!" The order shot through the fleet's communication network. 300 massive warships began to decelerate, grinding to a halt in the deep black of space. Well, 297 of them did. The Relentless, the Iron Fang, and the Stormbreaker just kept going, maintaining their previous speed and heading as they started to separate from the main fleet. "They're ignoring the stop order," the navigator said, stating the obvious in a shocked tone. Velkoth watched the 3 green icons shrink on his display, sailing off into the blackness, away from the protection of the armada. He waited, expecting them to slow down, to turn around, to do anything to show that living people were still at the controls. They did nothing. They just flew in a perfectly straight line. On and on they flew into the forbidden zone until they were nothing more than faint specks. "Commander," the sensor officer whispered, her voice filled with awe, "they're just gone." "What?" "The 3 ships, they vanished, not destroyed. There was no explosion, no debris. They just disappeared. Our sensors are showing nothing but empty space where they used to be." Velkoth suddenly found it very difficult to breathe. Around the bridge, the crew stared at their consoles in stunned silence. "Find them!" he yelled, his voice cracking. "Full power sensor sweep. They have to be out there somewhere." For 1 solid hour they searched. Long range, short range, every scanner and imager they had. They found absolutely nothing. 3 capital warships, each with a crew of 200, had simply ceased to exist. Captain Torres's last words haunted him. "I'm sorry for what's about to happen. What in the stars had those humans unleashed? What kind of cosmic horror had he blindly marched his entire fleet into?" Commander Velkoth had been on his feet for 36 straight hours, standing on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominant Will, and staring at tactical screens that were showing him the impossible. All around him, his crew scrambled with a silent, desperate panic, hunting for a solution that simply didn't exist. In just a few hours, 47 ships had vanished. They weren't destroyed or disabled. They were just gone, erased from the universe like a bad dream. 1 second, a ship was a solid green icon holding formation. The next, there was just black, empty space. There were no fireballs, no twisted metal, not even a whisper of a distress call. Nothing. The disappearances were random, chaotic, and made absolutely no sense. Vessels on the fleet's edge were taken. Ships nestled deep within the formation were plucked away. It didn't matter if it was a colossal battlecruiser or a nimble escort ship. They all vanished without a pattern. The only constant was the chilling silence. The moment a ship failed to answer a hail, it was already a memory. Within minutes, sometimes in the blink of an eye, it would simply cease to be. "Give me a status report," Velkoth ordered, his voice cracking. His throat was raw from barking commands. "Report!" he yelled. His tactical officer looked completely drained, her scales a dull, chalky gray instead of their normal brilliant color. Her hands trembled above her console. "We're at 253 ships, Commander. We've lost another 6 in the last hour." 6 more. That was more than 12,200 of his soldiers, just deleted from reality. "Any damage reports from the fleet?" he pushed. "Nothing, sir," she replied, her voice empty. "Every ship that's still with us is reporting green across the board. All systems are nominal." That was the detail that was shredding his sanity. The ships that remained were in perfect fighting condition, with no damage or system glitches to suggest they were even in a conflict. My crews were starting to panic, whispering that it felt like something was just watching them from the void. Yet every diagnostic we ran came back completely clean, right up until a ship just blinked out of existence. And the sensors? What about those spatial ripples? They're getting stronger, Commander. The entire effect is far more intense now. A couple of my sensor techs are getting some strange feedback. They're saying it feels like space itself is alive out here. A muscle in Velkoth's jaw jumped. "That's scientifically impossible." "I know, sir," she answered quietly. "It is." He spun toward the communications officer. "Have you heard anything from the humans?" "Only dead air, sir. We're screaming for a response on every frequency we've got. begging for a ceasefire, an explanation, anything. But all we get back is static. Maybe they couldn't hear his pleas, or maybe they were just ignoring him. A dark thought began to coil in Velkoth's stomach. What if they were gone too? If this thing that was erasing his fleet had also torn through the human colonies, there might be nobody left to answer him. But he knew that wasn't true. A cold, heavy certainty settled on him that the humans were right there, watching this whole nightmare unfold. "Commander!" the navigator cried out, his voice choked with panic. "There's something wrong with the jump coordinates." "Tell me what's wrong," Velkoth snapped. "I've been mapping escape vectors for the past hour, dozens of them to every safe point I can think of. But it doesn't matter what destination I input. The final calculation always shows us jumping deeper inside the exclusion zone." Velkoth was across this bridge in 3 long strides. "Show me, on the main screen." The navigator put the numbers up, and Velkoth could only stare at the impossible equations. Everything he knew about advanced physics told him this shouldn't be happening. But the data was undeniable. Every exit, every single path to safety just bent back toward the heart of human territory. It was like the universe had been twisted into a giant cosmic funnel, and they were caught in its inescapable current. "This can't be real," Velkoth whispered. "To pull something like this off, you'd need to bend space-time on a scale I can't even imagine. The power required would be godlike." The navigation officer looked up at him, his face ashen. "I know, sir, but the numbers are right. We can't jump out of here. We're trapped." That one word, trapped, hung over the bridge like a guillotine, caged. "Fine, we'll do this the hard way," Velkoth announced. "Chart a course to the border using sublight engines. We'll crawl out if we have to." "We already tried that, sir. The ships that tried to turn around and flee, they vanished even faster than the ones holding formation. It's almost like going backward sets it off. Then we go forward. Sir, forward leads us straight into the core of the zone, directly into human space." Velkoth fought down a scream of pure frustration, holding his voice steady by sheer willpower. "Are you telling me that the only direction we can go without being instantly erased is straight toward Earth?" "That's what all the data points to, sir." A new voice suddenly sliced through the heavy tension. "Commander, we have an incoming transmission. It's on a human frequency." Every single head on the bridge whipped toward the comm station. After hours of being ignored, they were finally getting an answer. "Put it on the screen," Velkoth commanded. The main view screen lit up, but there was no face, just a few simple ice-cold words. Stark white letters burned against a black background. Our translation software took less than a second to figure it out. "You were warned." That was it. 3 words. Then the connection died. Velkoth stared at the empty screen for what felt like a lifetime. The entire bridge crew was frozen in a state of shock. "Reply," he finally managed to say. "Tell them, message received. And tell them we are requesting immediate negotiations to arrange our withdrawal." The comms officer's fingers danced over his console. "Message away, sir." Then the waiting began. 5 minutes felt like an hour. 10 minutes, 20. Nothing but profound, unnerving silence. "Sir," the tactical officer said, her voice shaking, "we've lost 3 more ships just by sitting here." Velkoth's 4 hands clenched into fists as hard as rock. His breathing was shallow and sharp. He was the one who led his fleet into this slaughter. He was the one who had dismissed their warnings as empty threats. He had personally ordered the destruction of the human ship Cassandra and had scoffed at Captain Torres's final words. Now, his people were paying the price for his own blinding arrogance. "All ships," he announced, opening a fleet-wide channel. "This is Commander Velkoth. We've encountered a situation that we do not understand. We believe this is some kind of advanced human defensive weapon. Our jump drives are useless. We cannot retreat without accelerating our own destruction. Our only logical option is to press forward and pray to the gods that we can make it through this exclusion zone before—" He couldn't say the rest. Before what? Before they were all deleted from the universe? "Hold a tight formation," he ordered. "I want every single ship to report any anomaly, no matter how insignificant, the second you see it. Navigation, find the absolute quickest path through this hell. I don't care if it flies us right by Earth's front porch. We need to get out of this sector." "Sir," His sensor officer whispered, her voice barely audible. "You have to see this." Velkoth was by her side in an instant. She brought up a display of the space immediately surrounding their ship. At first, it just looked black, but then she began filtering through different sensor frequencies, looking at parts of the spectrum that Zithan eyes can't normally see. The blood in Velkoth's veins turned to ice. We weren't flying through empty space. We were inside something, some kind of impossibly huge structure. It looked like a giant cosmic spiderweb that stretched in every direction, far beyond what our sensors could possibly detect. And we could see countless threads, tiny filaments made of neither matter nor energy that connected this web to every last one of his ships. "What in all the hells am I looking at?" he breathed out. "I have no idea, sir. It's been around us the entire time. We just couldn't perceive it until I ran a full-spectrum sweep. I think it's some kind of field, a network. It has us completely trapped." "And the ships that vanished?" She brought up the sensor logs from the moments just before a destroyer disappeared. On the screen, Velkoth watched in utter horror as the thread attached to his destroyer began to pulse with a faint light. It started to glow brighter, and then it pulled taut. The ship itself seemed to fold, its physical form twisting in ways that defied physics, and then it just popped, vanishing from reality. The thread that had held it lingered for a moment, almost as if it were satisfied before it melted back into the web. "It's eating them," the sensor officer whispered, her voice thick with pure terror. "The field, this thing, it's consuming our ships." For the first time in his long and storied career, Velkoth felt true, gut-twisting fear. He had fought in dozens of wars and stared death in the face more times than he could remember, but he had always known what he was fighting. You can battle another warship, you can counter its weapons, you can outsmart an enemy commander. But how could you fight this? How do you fight the very fabric of space-time? How could you possibly strike back at an enemy you can't see, can't target, and can't even begin to comprehend? "Commander!" The comms officer's shout yanked him from his spiraling dread. "Another message coming in. It's not from the humans, sir. It's from the Endless Conquest, Captain Than's battlecruiser. We've got a visual anomaly report. Patch them through." Captain Than's face materialized on the screen. He was a seasoned veteran, a legend from a dozen wars, even older than Velkoth. Velkoth had known him for years and had never seen the man show a hint of fear. But right now, he looked utterly petrified. "Commander, I don't know how to describe this. My crew is seeing glitches in space. Phantom shapes flickering between our ships where there's nothing but empty void. And sir, 3 of my people are gone, vanished from inside sealed sections of my own vessel." "Gone? From inside the ship?" "Yes, sir. Our internal sensors tracked it. One second they're walking down a hallway. The next they're just not there. It's like they walked through a door that didn't exist and simply disappeared." Before Velkoth could even wrap his head around that, a new alarm began to blare. "Sir, multiple ships are reporting the exact same thing," the tactical officer shouted, her voice trembling. "Personnel are disappearing all over the fleet. Equipment is dematerializing right off its mounts. Some ships are reporting entire sections have gone completely dead. When they send teams to investigate, the sections are just empty, wiped clean, as if everything inside, including the search party, just blinked out of existence." Can you imagine being in charge of the most powerful fleet in the galaxy, only to see it dismantled by an enemy you can't even see? That was the living nightmare Commander Velkoth was trapped in. This wasn't a battle. It was an infestation. Something was phasing right through the armored hulls of his warships, snatching his soldiers and their gear into nothingness. How can you possibly fight a ghost that treats solid steel like it's not even there? Stick with me to find out how this impossible fight ends. "All ships, full lockdown procedures," Velkoth ordered, but a cold dread in his gut told him it was a pointless gesture. "Nobody moves solo. 4-person teams at all times. Seal off every non-essential deck." The commands were executed instantly. It made absolutely no difference. For the next 6 hours, Velkoth could only watch in horror as his command was systematically erased, not in a blaze of glorious combat, but slowly, meticulously, as if some invisible predator was taking its time to savor each kill. It had all the time in the universe, and his fleet was caught in a cage with no escape. Entire warships began to disappear, sometimes 2 or even 3 at once. The bizarre energy web that had trapped them seemed to glow a little brighter each time a ship was consumed, almost as if it was feeding. Crew members were plucked from existence out of locked rooms, from behind fortified positions, and even from the command bridges of their own vessels. One moment they were there, a living part of the fleet, and the next, they were simply gone. They left nothing behind but their terrified comrades, who were left trying to explain the impossible thing they had just witnessed. A few ships managed to broadcast for a few seconds before they vanished, and we could hear the frantic screams of the missing crews, claiming they were trapped in another place, a dimension where existence itself was agony. Then, as quickly as it began, the screaming would cut off and the channel would go dead. A report flashed on his screen. The Iron Storm, one of his most formidable battlecruisers, was found adrift and completely dead in space. There wasn't a single living thing on board. All 800 crew members had vanished from a ship that didn't have a single scratch or scorch mark on its hull. It was in perfect condition, its autopilot still humming. It was just completely empty. When a rescue team boarded the cruiser to investigate, they vanished too. After that, Velkoth gave the order for everyone to stand down. It was hopeless. Whatever was doing this didn't follow any rules of warfare he understood, and every attempt he made to fight back only cost him more lives. "What's our remaining strength?" he asked, his voice sounding distant and hollow. "We're down to just 12 ships, Commander," the tactical officer said. He could see the tear tracks on her face, and he couldn't blame her. "At this rate, the whole fleet will be gone in under 18 hours. 18 hours. In less than a full day, his grand armada of 300 warships and over 500,000 souls would be completely wiped from existence. Keep trying to hail the humans," Velkoth commanded, his voice shaking with a rage born of pure terror. Tell them we surrender. Offer them anything. Tell them this entire sector is theirs. Say whatever you have to, just make them call this thing off." The comms officer's fingers flew across her console, blasting out desperate pleas on every known frequency, begging, pleading, and promising the entire galaxy if the humans would just, please, pick up the phone. For 3 excruciating hours, they launched 147 distress calls into the void, and the only answer they got back was crushing silence. The mighty Zethan Warfleet, a military that had cracked planets for sport, could do nothing but fly deeper into an invisible trap that was taking them apart piece by piece. A strange, pulsing energy net had them boxed in, feeding on their ships, and they were completely helpless. Commander Velkoth couldn't get the image of the human captain they'd just killed out of his head. Her sorrowful eyes, her final warning. She knew this was going to happen. They all did. The humans had tried to warn them, tried to save them from their own arrogance, but the Zythan High Command had been too proud to listen. "Commander," his sensor officer stammered, his voice thick with fear, "I'm picking something up ahead, a vessel. Its design is human." A wild, desperate hope surged through Velkoth. "Put it on the main viewer, now," he yelled. "Right away, sir. They're opening a channel." A calm, human face appeared on the monitor. He was a middle-aged man in a crisp uniform, and his expression was one of almost pity. "Commander Velkoth," the man said calmly, "my name is Captain James Rivera. I am here to serve as a witness." "A witness?" The word didn't register. "We need your help. Your weapon, this trap, it's annihilating my fleet. You need to shut it down." Rivera slowly shook his head, a look of genuine regret in his eyes. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Commander. No one can. The moment you violated the exclusion zone, the defense grid activated automatically. It's designed to be impossible to shut down while unauthorized vessels are still within its perimeter." "Then authorize us. For God's sake, we'll leave right now." "You can't leave," Rivera said softly. "The grid won't let you. I'm sorry, Commander. I truly am. But we warned you time and time again. You chose not to listen." "This is a massacre," Velkoth roared. "No," Rivera corrected him, his voice unwavering. "This is self-defense. You brought a war fleet into our protected space after we repeatedly asked you not to. You destroyed our ship, the Cassandra, when she made one final plea to save you from yourselves. Every life lost here today is a direct result of your decisions. We didn't know. We had no idea you had something like this out here. That's precisely why we warned you, Rivera said. It's why the exclusion zone was created. It's why we begged the Galactic Council to make it clear that our borders were non-negotiable. We did everything we could to prevent this day from coming. You backed us into a corner. You really gave us no other way out. Another 3 ships vanished from Velkoth's tactical map, just blipped out of existence. What is this madness? Velkoth's voice trembled with sheer terror. What have you done to this entire sector? There was a long silence from Rivera, like he was debating how much to reveal. Back when our world was still tearing itself apart, we dreamed up weapons so awful we swore we'd never build them. One of them was a nightmare theory about weaponizing the very fabric of space, creating pockets that could snare a ship, freeze it in time, or just make it gone. We were smart enough not to use it on our own kind. We buried the project, but when we reached for the stars, we discovered how many bullies were waiting in the dark and how much they loved picking on the new kid. His voice faded for a second. We built 50 of them. 50 fully automated defense platforms hidden throughout the exclusion zone. Each one generates a field that can detect, analyze, and neutralize any unauthorized vessel. They're powered by vacuum energy, the ambient energy of space itself. They can operate for 10,000 years without a single technician. You've turned your entire border into a cosmic graveyard, Velkoth whispered, horrified. No, we turned our border into a warning that has teeth, Rivera corrected. Every other race uses fleets to guard their territory, but ships can be destroyed and fleets can be defeated. We decided that anyone who dared to invade human space wouldn't be fighting our ships. They would be fighting the fabric of space itself, and you can't win a war against the laws of physics. Velkoth's display now showed only 87 ships remaining. As he watched, the number flickered and dropped to 84. You're monsters, he choked out. Perhaps, Rivera conceded. But we are also alive, we are free, and our homes will never be threatened by anyone ever again. He paused. For what it's worth, Commander, I truly am sorry. I hope you believe me when I say we never wanted this. We just wanted to be left alone. The communication link went dead. Velkoth stood frozen on his bridge, a solitary statue watching his fleet get picked off ship by ship, knowing with a cold, terrifying certainty that he would not live to see another sunrise. His very last thought, as the air around him began to shimmer and distort, was that the humans had been telling the truth all along. They had tried to save him, and his pride had been too great to listen. For the first time in 300 years, the Galactic Council chamber was filled to capacity. Every species, every coalition, every major galactic power had sent a representative. They all sat in their designated pods, shrouded in a tense, heavy silence, as they waited for the session to begin. For 2 agonizing weeks, the galaxy had been holding its breath. 2 weeks since the entire Zithran fleet, 300 warships and over 500,000 souls, sailed into the human exclusion zone and simply disappeared. The silence in the Grand Council chamber wasn't respectful. It was the kind of silence born from pure, gut-wrenching fear. Speaker Tom Vaughn, a floating bird-like creature, rose from his pod, his beak trembling as he spoke. This emergency session of the Galactic Council is now underway. We are gathered to address the baffling disappearance of the Zithran Imperial Trade Fleet, he announced, his voice echoing. Their last confirmed position was within the territory claimed by the species known as humans from planet Earth. He paused as if bracing for a shockwave. Ambassador Chen of Earth has agreed to speak. I must remind you all, this is a diplomatic inquiry, not an execution. Every delegate will behave, and you will let the ambassador speak her piece. As if on cue, Sarah Chen walked through the colossal main doors. She crossed the vast floor alone, a solitary figure in a plain gray suit, standing in the very heart of the galactic government. She looked exactly the same as she had 3 months prior, calm, composed, her face a perfect mask. She certainly didn't look like someone who might be responsible for the single greatest act of mass murder in galactic history. "Ambassador Chen," the speaker said, his voice tight with tension, "this council demands to know what happened to the Zithran fleet. Do you have any answers for us?" "Yes," Chen said. That single simple word hit the room like a thunderclap. She wasn't going to play games. She wasn't going to deny a thing. Just yes. "Then please," the speaker urged, "enlighten us." Chen took a slow moment, her gaze sweeping across the chamber, making eye contact with dozens of alien ambassadors. When she finally spoke, her voice was crystal clear, ringing through the immense hall. "The Zithran fleet entered our restricted territory after being warned repeatedly not to. They knew precisely where the border was. They were told not to cross it. They chose to ignore our warnings. Our automated defense systems activated, precisely as designed. The fleet was neutralized." The chamber erupted into chaos. A tidal wave of shouts in 100 different languages crashed through the hall, a symphony of rage, confusion, and raw terror. The speaker had to slam his gavel 3 times just to be heard. "Are you admitting that you did this?" roared the Zithran replacement, a furious commander named Vishkal, his scales flushing a deep, violent crimson. "I am confirming that our automated defense system is 100% effective," Ambassador Chen replied, her voice still impossibly calm. "500,000 souls!" he shrieked. "You erased 500,000 of my people, and you have the audacity to stand there and admit it?" Chen's eyes locked onto his. "Yes, Commander, and I am truly sorry for your loss," Ambassador Chen stated, her voice a bizarre cocktail of sympathy and steel. "But we gave them every opportunity. We warned you right here in this chamber 3 months ago. We sent another warning the moment your fleet breached our space. And then a small, unarmed science vessel, the Cassandra, made one final, desperate plea for them to turn back, and your High Commander vaporized it. He took a message of peace as an act of aggression and led his armada straight into the very consequences he was warned about. The blame for what happened next lies squarely on his shoulders." "You butchered them!" Vreshkal screamed. "We defended our home," Chen corrected him, her tone unwavering. "There is a fundamental difference. This council must condemn this act," Vreshkal begged, scanning the room for allies. "We cannot allow one species to annihilate a fleet without consequence. It was the Zithrans today, but it could be any one of you tomorrow." He wasn't wrong, and you could see a ripple of fear and agreement spread through the delegates. But then, Ambassador Creel of the Van Collective, an ancient reptilian being, spoke up, her voice like cracking ice. "Ambassador Chen, I believe I have a question that cuts to the heart of this matter. You claim your defenses responded as designed. Could you elaborate on what these systems are? How did they make 300 warships vanish without a trace? No debris, no bodies, not even a whisper of an energy signature?" Chen remained silent for a long beat. "To explain our technology in detail," she said at last, "would be to hand our most vital military secrets to every government represented here. That is not something we are prepared to do. However, given the gravity of the situation, the government of Earth has authorized me to provide a limited demonstration." She touched a small device, and massive holographic images bloomed in the air above her, filled with impossible equations, strange maps of space-time, and schematics that looked less like weapons and more like cosmic art. "During the last major conflict on our world, long before we achieved unity, several nations were exploring theoretical weapons capable of warping space and time. The projects were abandoned, deemed too dangerous, too unethical to exist. But when we reached the stars and discovered just how many bullies occupied the galactic playground, we decided to dust off that old research. It took us 60 years to perfect the theory and another 20 to build the hardware. The result is a system we call the exclusion net." She gestured, and the display shifted to a map of her solar system. 50 glowing points appeared in a perfect calculated orbit. 50 automated platforms. Each one projects a field that blankets our entire territory. These fields overlap, creating an invisible, impenetrable web of twisted space-time. When an unauthorized vessel enters our space, the net activates and does what? Creel insisted. "It removes them," Chen stated plainly. "The ships aren't destroyed. They aren't atomized. They are folded into infinitesimally small pocket dimensions, entirely new realities that exist alongside our own, but which can never ever be accessed. From our perspective, they simply cease to exist. A collective, horrified gasp swept through the room. Some delegates began chanting ancient prayers. Others just stared, their faces completely slack with disbelief. "Are you telling this council," the speaker stammered, his voice trembling, "that the entire Zithran fleet is still out there, trapped in another dimension?" "That's one way of looking at it," Chen confirmed, though the term exists is not entirely accurate. You see, these pocket dimensions were never intended to support life. They don't adhere to our laws of physics, and time itself has no meaning there. Anything sent into the net is instantly locked in a state we call quantum stasis. It is neither alive nor dead. "That is monstrous," someone whispered from the gallery. "And it's effective," Chen countered, her voice as cold and vast as the weapon she was describing. "Imagine you're the biggest bully on the playground. You swagger up to the quiet new kid to steal his lunch money, only to discover his dad is the heavyweight champion of the world." That was the reality check the Zithran Empire just received. "You have condemned my people to an eternal hell," the Zithran commander Vreshkal screamed, his voice cracking with rage and grief. "Trapped forever in some waking nightmare because of your exclusion net." If you've ever been pushed around and dreamed of the day you could finally stand up for yourself, you need to hear what she said next. "That's a very colorful interpretation," Ambassador Chen replied, her composure a chilling shield against his fury. "In fact, it is the complete opposite of torture. They feel nothing. For them, time is frozen. They cannot suffer because they cannot experience. It is less a prison and more like an endless, dreamless sleep from which they will never awaken." The old ambassador, Creel, leaned in. "Is there any way to reverse it? To bring them back?" "Theoretically, yes. If we were to deactivate the platforms, the energy fields would collapse, and anything caught within would be expelled back into normal space," Chen elaborated. "But lowering the net would leave our homeworld completely exposed. We have no intention of ever doing that." Vreshkal slammed a fist on his console. "So they're lost forever." Chen's expression turned to granite. "They were lost the moment Commander Veliksoth decided our warnings were a bluff and gave the order to advance." "We could not have been more clear, Commander," Chen continued, her gaze passing over the sea of stunned alien faces. "We broadcasted warnings on every known frequency. Your High Commander made a bet. He bet that a fledgling species like humanity was all bark and no bite. He bet that we couldn't possibly have the means to stop his mighty armada." She let the silence hang in the air. "He lost the bet. That is a tragedy, but it is not our crime." An immense, heavy silence settled over the chamber. You could almost hear the frantic calculations as every single delegate reevaluated humanity's standing in the galaxy. The speaker, Tom Von, finally found his voice. "Ambassador Chen, this council has much to consider, but I have one final question. Now that the existence of this weapon is known, and you've even given us a glimpse into its mechanics," Tom Von went on, "are you not concerned that other powers will now race to develop their own, or worse, find a counter to yours?" For the very first time that day, the faintest hint of a cold, confident smile touched Ambassador Chen's lips. "They are welcome to try," she said. "The quantum mechanics involved took our greatest minds centuries to master. Even with the hints I've laid out today, it would take your most brilliant scientists centuries just to scratch the surface. And by that time," she said, "our tech will be light years beyond this. That exclusion net that has everyone terrified, that's last generation hardware, speaker. We're already on versions 2 and 3. She let that sink in for a moment. "But above all else," she concluded, her voice turning as cold and empty as the void between stars, "we hope no one is ever foolish enough to make us do this again. This is your one and only warning. Earth has borders. They are not guidelines. If you cross them, we will not engage you in battle. You will simply cease to exist. That is not a threat. It is a guarantee." "And what if we label this a war crime?" the Zithran ambassador shrieked. What if the council votes to sanction you, to force you to dismantle these monstrosities? Chen's polite, practiced smile vanished completely. Then we will respectfully refuse, and we will withdraw from this galactic council. We came here in search of peace and friendship. If this council is unable to protect our basic right to exist undisturbed, she continued, if our simple desire to be left alone is interpreted as an act of aggression, then this is not the place for us. We will return to our home system, lock our doors, and sever all communication with the rest of the galaxy. You would cut yourselves off entirely? Creel asked, his expression one of pure disbelief. So no commerce, no sharing of culture, absolutely zero contact? The speaker pressed, his voice booming in the silent chamber. If that is the price of our safety, then yes, Ambassador Chen answered, her voice unwavering. We managed for 10,000 years on one little world. We can do it again in our small corner of the universe. It isn't the future we hoped for, but it beats constantly fending off bullies who can't stand the new kids on the cosmic block. She looked around this chamber, meeting the eyes of the council members one last time. We ventured out here hoping to make friends, she said, her voice tinged with genuine sorrow. Instead, we found predators. So you left us no choice but to become the one thing a predator respects and leaves alone. This wasn't the story we wanted to write for ourselves, but it is the one you forced upon us. The Zithan Empire made a gamble with the lives of its soldiers, she said flatly. The consequences of that gamble are their burden to bear, not ours. With that, she offered a respectful nod to Speaker Tom Vaughn and began to walk away. Wait! A voice called out. It was Ambassador Yulin. In a shocking break with all protocol, his personal transport pod lowered to the floor. Ambassador Chen, might I have a moment of your time in private? Chen stopped, her curiosity piqued. Of course, Ambassador. The second the two of them stepped into an adjacent room, the main hall erupted into chaos. As the door sealed shut, Ulina's composed, diplomatic mask fell away. I tried to stop him, he whispered, his voice tight with stress. 3 months ago. I told Velixoth that humans were not a people to be trifled with. I told him you were not ones for empty threats. He refused to listen. We know, Chen replied softly. We monitored the entire exchange. We're grateful that you tried to talk some sense into him. Grateful enough to tell me what actually happened? Ulin pushed, his gaze fixed on hers. What you told the council, all that talk about pocket dimensions and stasis fields, that was the simplified version, wasn't it? There's something more to your exclusion net. Chen met his stare for a long, heavy moment before giving a slow, deliberate nod. Yes, there is much more. Are you going to tell me what it is? Why is it so vital that you know? Chen asked in return. Because my entire life's work has been the study of your species, Ulin answered. And if I have learned a single thing about humanity, it is that you are the ultimate masters of the long game. You don't just have a plan. You have plans inside of plans, with contingencies for your contingencies. That net is a terrifying piece of technology, he confessed. But I simply cannot accept that it's the only ace you're holding. Chen's expression was a flawless poker face, completely unreadable, but her silence spoke volumes. I can tell you this, she finally offered. Those platforms that generate the pockets in space, they are 100% defensive in nature. They only activate when an unauthorized vessel crosses into our territory. However, we also possess offensive capabilities, weapons that can strike any target over any distance against any power that declares itself an enemy of Earth. We have never once fired them. We pray to God we never have to, but they exist. Hidden somewhere inside your exclusion zone, Ulin surmised. Chen shook her head. Hidden everywhere. The words hit him like a physical blow. We've had 80 years to prepare, Ambassador. 80 years to plant our seeds and weave our safety nets. We made absolutely sure that the survival of Earth would never hinge on a single battle in one tiny slice of space. We are a cautious people. Some might even call us paranoid. Perhaps they are right. But that paranoia has kept our species alive. A chill ran down Ulin's spine. Are you saying that Earth can hit any target anywhere in the galaxy at a moment's notice? What we're saying is that anyone who harms Earth will spend the rest of their life regretting it. A very, very brief rest of their life, Chen corrected him. We don't publicize this because we are not seeking conflict. But if anyone ever forces our hand, we will do what is necessary to survive. That is the true purpose of the exclusion net, Ambassador. It is not merely a shield for our world. It is a declaration that we have anticipated every conceivable threat, and we have an answer prepared for each and every one. She walked toward the door, then paused for a final comment. "And thank you sincerely for trying to warn them," she said, her tone softening. "This galaxy is desperately in need of more reasonable minds like yours. I can only hope that one day people will actually start to listen. Until that day comes, we'll keep our defenses up and hope that the fate of the Zithon fleet serves as a lesson for everyone else." And with that, she was gone, leaving Ambassador Yulin to grapple with the chilling new reality of what humanity had become. They were not conquerors seeking to forge an empire. They were something far more formidable. They were survivors, so fiercely committed to their own existence that they had quietly engineered themselves into the one force the rest of the galaxy would learn to avoid at all costs. Back in the main chamber, the furious arguments were still in full swing, but Yulin knew it was all theater now. The Council would issue an official condemnation of Earth's actions. They would lodge formal protests, they would demand greater transparency, and ultimately, they would do absolutely nothing. Because no one, not a single soul, wanted to be the one to find out what other surprises humanity had waiting in the wings. The Zithan Empire had bet everything and lost it all. Nobody was rushing to repeat that mistake. A mere 6 months later, the galactic map was virtually unrecognizable. The most dramatic change was the Zithan Empire itself. It no longer existed. Without its military command and the iron grip that held its territories in check, the empire collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. 47 star systems that had been brutally subjugated for generations rose up in unison. Some immediately declared their independence. Others hurried to forge new alliances. A few descended into civil war. But for the most part, a massive wave of liberation was sweeping across the galaxy. The Council deployed a handful of peacekeepers, but largely opted to just watch and see how things unfolded. There was zero appetite for trying to reassemble the old empire, especially when the alternative was allowing countless enslaved peoples to experience freedom for the very first time. Acting Commander Freshcall, the very officer who had screamed at Chen, attempted to hold his crumbling empire together for 3 weeks before he finally threw in the towel. He broadcast a final desperate message to the entire galaxy. "The Zithan Empire is no more," he declared, his voice heavy with defeat. "We built our power on the fiction that we were invincible. Earth showed us the reality. Our storied fleet, our beloved commander, our national pride, all of it erased in the blink of an eye because we were too arrogant to conceive of defeat. Let our absolute and total ruin be a warning to anyone who believes that might is the only thing that matters," he cautioned. "The rules of the game have changed forever." The very next day, he resigned his commission and disappeared to a quiet agricultural world, refusing to speak another word about the fleet or his historic failure. In the Galactic Council, the change was more subtle but just as profound. A new era had begun, and suddenly the quiet new species on the block was commanding an immense amount of attention and respect. It was as if the entire galaxy collectively remembered its manners overnight. Species known for their blustering threats and aggressive posturing were now carefully weighing every single word. Grand plans for military expansion were quietly filed away in forgotten cabinets. Trade disputes that would have triggered wars just a week earlier were now being resolved with, of all things, civil conversation. The reason for this sudden outbreak of politeness was the enormous elephant in every room, Earth's no-go zone. No one dared speak its name. But its presence was felt everywhere, shaping every treaty, every negotiation, and every strategic calculation. A single question hung in the air. If humans could make the Zitherans vanish so completely, what could they do to us? Ambassador Chen witnessed the transformation firsthand. Delegates who once wouldn't give her the time of day now approached her with a bizarre, almost fearful reverence. Some attempted to get close to her, seeking advice and hoping to earn Earth's favor. Others kept a wide berth, as if they feared a simple disagreement might lead to their entire civilization being erased from the star charts. It was draining. "They're afraid of us now," she admitted to her aide one evening. "And that's the one thing we never wanted. We just wanted to be left alone," the ambassador said with a deep sigh. Her aide countered, "In this galaxy, being left alone means being feared. There's no middle ground. No one respects a fence unless they think it'll shock them." Chen nodded grimly. "I know. That doesn't mean I have to like it." That invisible, electrified fence, the exclusion zone, had become a bizarre tourist attraction, though nobody was foolish enough to actually try and touch it. Ships would cautiously approach the boundary, getting just close enough to feel the strange ripple in space-time before flooring their engines in reverse. Some captains would hold quiet memorials for Zitharan crews they once knew, but most came just to gawk at the spot where 300 warships had blinked out of existence. Near a primary entry point, humanity had constructed a memorial station. How do you recover when your entire empire is brought to its knees in a single afternoon by the weakest species in the galaxy? What happens when the quiet kid who never bothers anyone finally gets up and lays out the schoolyard bully with a single punch? You end up like Krenal, a young Zitharan officer, staring at the tombstone humanity built on the grave of his people. Etched into it were the names of every crew member from the science vessel. Cassandra, the last humans who tried to warn his people. Beneath their names was one haunting line. They volunteered to be the final warning. They prayed you would listen. If you've ever wondered what happens when you push someone too far, you're about to find out. A longer message scrolled for everyone to read. This exclusion zone is not an act of aggression. It is a plea for peace. We only ask that you respect our territory, just as we respect yours. The fleet that crossed this line disregarded countless warnings. Their destruction was a preventable tragedy. We hope no other civilization ever compels us to demonstrate our resolve in this manner again. The message concluded, "We would much rather be your partners than your enemies. The choice, now and for all time, is yours." Directly beneath the plaque, a literal line of glowing energy was projected into the void, marking the exact boundary of the exclusion net. The unspoken threat was perfectly clear. Cross this line uninvited, and you will share the fate of the Zitharan fleet. It was a simple, brutal, and absolute promise. In the months that followed, ships from every corner of known space would drift in, read the message, and silently turn around. This new understanding of humanity sent shockwaves through the galactic community. Trade agreements that had been stalled for years were suddenly fast-tracked and signed. All at once, everyone wanted to be an ally, proposing joint research missions and expanding cultural exchanges. No one said it out loud, but it didn't take a genius to figure it out. Being friends with Earth was far more profitable than daring to be its enemy. Human colonies outside the protected zone saw a massive decrease in pirate raids. Smugglers who once viewed human cargo ships as easy targets now gave them a wide berth. Bully species that used to extort protection money from human settlements suddenly lost interest. And the handful of morons who decided to test humanity's new reputation, they simply vanished. Their ships would sometimes be found months later, adrift and powerless, with no crew and no evidence of a struggle. Earth never claimed responsibility. They didn't need to. 6 months after the Zitharan fleet was erased, an ambassador named Yulin published a paper titled "The Quiet Ones: An Analysis of Human Galactic Policy." It instantly became required reading for every diplomat in the galaxy. Its central thesis was shockingly straightforward. Humans do not make threats they cannot enforce. They don't posture, they don't boast, and they absolutely never, ever bluff. When they draw a line in the sand or in the stars, that line is real. And when they give a warning, you would be incredibly wise to listen. The paper explored the terrifying and bizarre patterns throughout human history. It demonstrated that if you left them in peace, they were the most cooperative and unassuming neighbors imaginable. But if you backed them into a corner, if you gave them truly no way out, they would invent something so reality-shattering that it rewrote the rules of conflict itself. Things like nuclear fire, genetically engineered plagues, self-aware artificial intelligence, and even weapons that could tear holes in the fabric of space-time. Humans, Yulin wrote, are not the most aggressive species. They aren't the most warlike or even the most prone to violence. But when their very survival is threatened, they are, without question, the most terrifyingly creative. They enter every conflict assuming they could lose, which drives them to prepare for every worst-case scenario they can dream up. This makes them infinitely more dangerous than any race that believes victory comes from simply having bigger ships or more powerful guns. The paper's final conclusion sent a shiver down the spine of every military leader who read it. The galaxy is left with two options. Option 1, we treat Earth's borders as absolute, respect their territory, and coexist peacefully with a species that genuinely wants to be left alone. Option 2, we can continue to poke the bear and discover what other unspeakable nightmares they've been working on in their labs. The Zitharan Empire chose option 2. Let their ghosts serve as a lesson to us all. At the military academy on Chven Prime, every cadet was now required to study Yulin's paper, alongside a detailed analysis of what befell the Zitharan Armada. The lessons were hammered home with brutal efficiency. You will respect the borders of other species, you will heed all warnings, and you will never, ever make the assumption that superior numbers or technology guarantees a win. One combat simulation in particular became the new gold standard for training. Cadets were placed in a virtual command chair with a simple scenario. Your fleet is approaching a defensive perimeter established by a local species. They have issued a final warning not to cross. Your superiors have ordered you to breach their space and secure a strategic resource. The simulation would then prompt, "What is your command?" Every cadet quickly learned there was only one correct answer: disobey the order and refuse to advance. You might survive a battle against enemy ships. You cannot survive a battle against the laws of physics when they've been weaponized. More to the point, following an order that results in the annihilation of your entire fleet helps absolutely no one. They began to call it the Zitharan scenario. Back within human territory, the changes were just as profound, though entirely hidden from outside eyes. The 50 gigantic platforms that powered the exclusion field were in a constant state of refinement and enhancement. Their quantum cores were frequently recalibrated, and their software was perpetually being upgraded. They were developing defenses for threats that hadn't even been conceived of yet. But to an outside observer, the platforms appeared completely unchanged. They operated flawlessly, which meant the truly revolutionary work was happening in the shadows. Ambassador Chen hadn't been bluffing when she hinted to her peers that Earth had more cards to play. What she conveniently failed to mention was the sheer scale of that program. Far beyond their defensive shield, Earth had secretly deployed 300 autonomous defense platforms into the vast emptiness of space. They were cloaked along major trade routes, hidden near bustling star systems, and positioned at strategic choke points to neutralize any threat to Earth or its colonies. Each and every station was armed to the teeth. They were equipped with the same reality-bending technology as the exclusion net, but these were designed for precision strikes, not for wiping out an entire region. They had never been fired, not even once. Almost no one in the galaxy even knew they existed, which was precisely how Earth preferred it. The head of Earth's Strategic Defense Command had a favorite motto: "The greatest weapon is the one you never have to use." The exclusion net was a success. It stopped one massive threat and deterred 1,000 others simply by existing. That is the textbook definition of effective deterrence. But behind closed doors, the debates were endless. The loss of 500,000 Zitharan lives was a heavy burden for many human leaders. Some insisted there must have been another option, a way to simply disable the fleet rather than utterly erasing it from reality. The rebuttal was always the same. Anything short of total annihilation would have been perceived as a mere setback. The Zitharans would have regrouped, rearmed, and come back stronger. The arguments never reached a conclusion. The exclusion net remained active, the border remained absolute, and the galaxy learned to live with this new reality. 3 years after his empire's fall, a young Zitharan officer named Krenal was on a patrol near what used to be his people's sovereign space. He now captained a small corvette, flying the banner of the new Zitharan Federation. He was part of a peacekeeping mission, struggling to hold the fractured systems of his former empire together. One day, his patrol route brought him uncomfortably close to the shimmering boundary of Earth's exclusion zone. He had only been a boy when High Commander Velkoth led that armada to its doom, but the catastrophe had ripped his own family apart. He had lost an uncle, 2 cousins, and several childhood friends. They had all enlisted with patriotic fervor, excited to go teach the humans a lesson. Not a single one of them returned. Krenal gave the order for his ship to maintain its position at what he prayed was a safe distance, close enough to see the human memorial station on his view screen, but far enough away that he wouldn't trigger any alarms. My first officer, a grizzled old vet from the Imperial Fleet, stepped up beside me on the bridge. "Paying your respects, sir?" he rumbled. "Something like that," I murmured, my gaze locked on the memorial floating in the black. "Did you lose anyone on those ships?" He let out a slow breath. "Too many. Good soldiers, fierce fighters. Just following orders, the same way any of us would have." I stared at the monument the humans had built, a silent testament to a massacre. "They didn't deserve to die that way," I finally choked out. "No," the old soldier agreed, his voice a low growl. "They did not." He looked at me, his eyes reflecting the distant starlight. "But why? Why would the humans build something so final?" "I've asked myself that 1,000 times, sir," the vet sighed, the sound heavy with exhaustion. "I've read every report, every analysis, and I think the answer is simpler than we want to admit. They were terrified." "Of us?" The idea was almost laughable. "Of everyone," he corrected. "Look at it from their side. Earth is one little planet, one species. We're 1,000 species spread across 1,000,000 worlds, with fleets that can blot out their sun. To them, the universe was filled with monsters that could snuff them out in an instant," he went on. "They knew they could never win a long war against the great empires. They couldn't match our production. So they created something that made massive fleets and huge armies completely irrelevant." I nodded, the cold, hard logic finally sinking in. "They built a weapon so scary no one would ever dare attack them again." "It was more than a weapon, sir," he said softly. "It was a guarantee. A promise you couldn't afford to see if they'd keep. Commander Velkoth thought it was a bluff. He couldn't imagine a species would actually use something like the exclusion net. But the one thing you learn about humans is that they don't bluff. They told us exactly what would happen if we crossed that line, and we did. And so we're just supposed to hate them for it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The veteran was quiet for a long time. "I don't know, part of me does. They killed my friends, shattered our empire, and changed our lives forever. But another part knows we were given every chance to turn back. Our pride just wouldn't let us listen." He pointed a clawed hand toward the memorial on the view screen. "The humans built that. Not as a trophy, but to honor their own dead, the crew of their ship, the Cassandra, the one that sent a final, desperate plea for us to stand down. That has to count for something, right? They never wanted this. They did everything they could to stop it. We were the ones who forced their hand." I couldn't tear my eyes from the screen. "If you'd been in command that day, would you have made a different choice?" "I hope so," the veteran said, his voice thick with old pain. "I hope I would have listened to their Captain Torres and ordered a retreat, but I was raised in the old empire, sir. I was taught that retreat was for cowards. If I'd been in Commander Velkoth's place, I'm terrified I would have made the exact same catastrophic mistake." He paused, the words catching in his throat. "That's what haunts me. Not that our people died, but that I could have been the one who led them into that trap." Just then, a soft chime echoed from a console. The communications officer turned in her chair. "Sir, an incoming message. It's a human vessel broadcasting from inside the exclusion zone." I felt my heart hammer against my ribs. On the screen, the memorial was replaced by the face of a human woman in a military uniform. She looked about my age. "This is Lieutenant Sarah Kim of the Earth Defense Force ship, the Sentinel. You're holding position near the Earth Exclusion Zone demarcation line. Do you require any assistance?" Her voice was perfectly calm and professional, with no hint of hostility. I took a steadying breath. "No assistance needed, Lieutenant. I am Officer Krenal of the Zatharan corvette New Dawn. We are on a routine patrol." I paused, then decided on the truth. I had relatives on the ships that were lost 3 years ago. I wanted to see the memorial. The professional mask on Lieutenant Kim's face melted into one of genuine compassion. "I understand. I'm very sorry for your loss, Officer Krenal. Please, take all the time you need. The memorial is for everyone who needs to remember." "Thank you," I said. Then I asked the question that had been burning inside me. "Lieutenant," I began, my voice low, "did you know anyone on the Cassandra?" Kim gave a small, sad nod. "Captain Torres was my mentor at the academy. She taught me everything. She knew it was a one-way mission when she volunteered. She had this crazy hope that if our people saw humans willing to sacrifice themselves just to send a final warning, it might convince Commander Velkoth to stand down." I stared out into the cold, empty space. "But it didn't," I said, the words feeling like ice. "No," Kim whispered, and I could see the hurt in her eyes. "It wasn't. Captain Torres knew the odds were almost zero, but she said she had to try. That's who she was." I thought about that. "So your people remember her as a hero?" "Of course," Kim replied. "There's a monument to her at Earth's primary orbital station. Her final message is required viewing for all new cadets. At the academy, they tell you the best soldiers are the ones who never have to fight. Diplomats first, warriors second. They hold up Captain Torres as the ultimate hero who tried to stop a war. But as I stood there, looking at the memorial for the 500,000 souls we lost, the story didn't make sense. If you've ever felt like the official story is missing a few key chapters, hit that subscribe button because you're about to learn the truth they tried to bury." I found my friend Lieutenant Kim in the ship's archives. "Kim, can I ask you something for real?" I whispered. "Completely off the record. Do you really believe what happened was right?" Kim let out a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of all those lost lives. "That's a complicated question, Krenal," she said, her eyes on an old data pad. "It was a horrific tragedy, but you've seen the history files. You know what happens to species that can't defend themselves. They get erased. Earth chose to build a fortress instead of a tomb." But there was something she didn't know. My great-grandmother was on one of those ships, and it wasn't a warship. It was a refugee transport. That was the first surprise, the first crack in the official story. For weeks, I dug through classified logs and found another bombshell. The defense grid fired a full 30 minutes before our fleet was in attack range. This wasn't a defense, it was an ambush. Then, buried under layers of encryption, I found it. Captain Torres never gave the order. It came from a civilian administrator, a man who is now one of the most powerful politicians in the government. Our people weren't invaders. They were fleeing his own brutal regime, and he used a fake alien threat to eliminate them and seize power. Torres was just the convenient hero they pinned the story on. We couldn't let him get away with it. Working together, Kim and I leaked the original unedited logs. The administrator was exposed, his career obliterated. Captain Torres was finally honored as a true patriot who had been betrayed. It was a quiet revenge, a happy ending written into the margins of history, and it taught us the most important lesson of all: the truth is always worth fighting for. "We made ourselves too dangerous to attack," she continued, choosing her words like she was navigating a minefield. "What happened to your fleet? That was the terrible, bloody price we paid to prove our defenses were real. It was an awful price, but it has stopped hundreds of other wars from ever starting. How many conflicts were avoided because other empires now think twice? How many trillions of lives have been saved because the bullies learned that a bigger army doesn't guarantee a win?" I had to ask. "So the ends justified the means?" "I think the means were monstrous," she answered immediately. "And I wish with every fiber of my being there had been another way. But I also know that if we hadn't shown the galaxy we were serious, someone else would have attacked, and then another. The exclusion net doesn't have a negotiate setting. You can't talk it down. It's a machine, just running its code. Your fleet had to learn that lesson in the most horrific way possible, ensuring no one else ever would. The weight of her words seemed to hang in the air of the small cockpit. I value your candor, Lieutenant. We believe honesty is crucial, she replied, especially with those who've paid such a high price for our safety. Is there anything more you need? No, that covers it all. Thank you. We'll be departing soon. Kim responded with a crisp nod. May your journey be safe, Officer Crenal. And once more, I am deeply sorry for what you lost. The monitor went black. Crenal sank back into his command chair, her words replaying in his head. She appears to be reasonable, his second-in-command murmured, for one of the species that shattered our empire. She is, Crenal conceded, and that is what's so incredibly unsettling. It's one thing to be ignored, but it's a whole other level of awful to be the galaxy's punching bag. And that was humanity. We were the newcomers, and when we declared our little corner of space off limits, the older, tougher species thought it was hilarious. They saw us as an easy target, a free buffet. But one empire was about to find out that when humanity gives a warning, it's not just a suggestion, it's a guarantee. What would you do if the biggest bully in the universe decided to kick down your front door? Stick around, because the answer to that question rewrote the rules for the entire cosmos. The message we broadcast was simple: stay out. Just 2 words, playing on a loop on every known frequency at the edge of our solar system. A permanent notice that this patch of space was ours. Across the galaxy, in the grand halls of the Galactic Council, the powerful empires chuckled. Our ambassador, a sharp woman named Chen, stood before them, simply asking for our right to be left in peace. She explained that we weren't looking for a fight. We just wanted the room to grow and figure things out on our own terms. But in a galaxy that ran on a might makes right philosophy, asking for space was interpreted as a sign of weakness. The dominant empires, whose power was built on conquering other worlds, only respected one currency: force. And they were convinced we were broke. That's when the massive Zithran Empire decided it was time to prove us wrong. They dispatched their Grand Armada, the most feared fleet in this arm of the galaxy. They weren't coming to talk. They were coming to make an example of the new kids. Back on Earth, we watched the reports with our hearts pounding in our chests. We were a species that had barely mastered space travel. How on earth could we face them? We all understood that losing meant losing everything. Ambassador Chen issued one last desperate warning, but the Zithran commander, dripping with condescension, just laughed and ended the transmission. What the Zithrans failed to understand was that our off-limits zone wasn't just a line on a map, it was a trigger. As their fleet sailed across that boundary, they weren't greeted by torpedoes or warships. For a brief moment, there was just dead silence. The Zithran commander likely thought he'd already won. And then, it happened. The very space their fleet occupied simply switched off. Every ship and every last one of the 500,000 souls aboard was extinguished in an instant. There was no fireball, no debris field, just gone. This was our ultimate secret. A defensive weapon so absolute, so chilling, that we had hidden it away, praying to never have to flip that switch. We never wanted to be the monsters lurking in the galactic shadows, but they gave us no other option. The penalty for crossing our line was complete and instantaneous erasure. The galaxy fell into a stunned silence. The laughter died. The contempt soured into raw fear, and out of that fear, a new, cautious kind of respect began to grow. All of a sudden, everyone wanted to have a conversation. In the Galactic Council, a new law was fast-tracked to the floor, championed by all the smaller species that had lived under the boot of the larger empires for generations. The idea was breathtakingly simple. Every species has the right to their own sovereign space. They insisted on calling it the Earth Accord, honoring the little species that proved a shield could be more powerful than any sword. Ironically, Ambassador Chen herself argued against the name. "We don't want this to be about us," she told the council. We just want to be one of many who have the fundamental right to be left alone. But the name stuck. The Earth Accord was passed by an overwhelming majority. The old guard, the predatory empires, were suddenly living in a brand new world. They began talking about trade deals instead of invasion plans. They tried sending diplomats instead of death threats. Our revenge wasn't just in winning that fight without firing a shot. It was in changing the entire rulebook for everyone. We proved that you didn't need to be the biggest or the baddest to have a right to exist. Conflict didn't disappear overnight, but the era of casual cosmic bullying was over. Boundaries now meant something. Warnings were now taken seriously. Years later, Ambassador Chen gave her farewell address before retiring. She stared out at the assembled delegates, many of whom had once openly mocked her. "I will make no apologies for our government's actions," she stated, her voice as firm as granite. "We did what we had to do to protect our people." Then her face softened just a little. "But we never wanted to be a source of fear," she confessed. "This is not the relationship we hope to have with the rest of the galaxy, but it is the one you chose for us. It was only after we showed you the devastating cost of crossing our boundary that you finally decided we were worth listening to." She reminded them that respect born from fear is a flimsy thing, easily broken. True respect, she said, is built on a foundation of understanding and equality. "It is my deepest hope," she concluded, "that future generations will look back on this moment not as a display of human might, but as the very last time anyone had to learn that some lines should never, ever be crossed." The entire council rose to their feet in a standing ovation, a gesture of respect almost unheard of in those halls. She returned to a quiet life on Earth, never again venturing into space. She never laid eyes on the monument we eventually placed at the edge of our system, a simple beacon that broadcast the words, "Stay out." But the story isn't over yet. In fact, the most shocking part was still to come. A decade later, the Zithran Federation, the very empire we had so thoroughly humbled, did the unthinkable. They constructed a second, enormous monument right beside our own. Carved into its surface were 500,000 names, the name of every single person lost aboard that fleet. And beneath that heartbreakingly long list, a message was engraved for all time. It said, "They were following their duty. They had faith in their empire. They were warned, but they did not listen. And they paid the ultimate price. Let their sacrifice be an eternal lesson that arrogance is no substitute for wisdom." The engraving continued. "May their memory remind us that every action has a consequence. Your strength does not give you the right to trample the rights of others." On the day of its dedication, starships from dozens of different species gathered at a respectful distance, not for war, but to bear witness. Not a single one of them dared to cross the line. Our new ambassador, David Martinez, sent out a simple message. "We are not here today to celebrate a victory or to mourn a defeat," he said. "We are here to mark a moment in time that changed our galaxy for the better, forever." And that's the real happy ending. It wasn't just that we saved our home. It's that our worst enemy learned from their catastrophic error and then helped teach that lesson to the rest of the universe. In her final writings, Chen put down a thought I'll never forget. People will argue for eternity about whether we did the right thing. I think they're asking the wrong question. We did exactly what we promised we would do. We drew a line in space, we told everyone not to cross it, and when someone finally did, we enforced that line. "That is not an act of cruelty," she wrote. "It is an act of consistency. And in a galaxy where might makes right has always been the law of the land, sometimes consistency is the most powerful weapon you can have." In the end, humanity didn't just carve out a place for itself among the stars. We taught the galaxy a lesson it was desperate to learn, that the right to simply be left alone is a right worth defending, and that true power isn't found in conquering others, but in having the courage to protect what is yours. We finally achieved what we had wanted all along. Not fear, not fame, but something far more basic and far more precious: peace. "Every single name carved into this memorial," the president said, his voice thick with emotion, "belongs to someone who died because a line was crossed. Their deaths were a profound tragedy, a preventable catastrophe that we will remember forever. But from their sacrifice, a legacy was born, a promise that this terrible lesson will never have to be learned again. He paused, his eyes scanning the silent crowd. On behalf of all of humanity, Earth offers its deepest sympathies to the Zithran Federation and to every family who lost someone they loved. We all hope for a future where strength isn't measured by weapons, he went on, a time when our actions are guided by mutual respect, not by fear. But we are not there yet, and until that day comes, the exclusion field remains active. That border is final. This warning is eternal. He then motioned towards the two immense monuments floating against the velvet black of space. Let these two sentinels stand together as one, he proclaimed. One was built by humans, the other by Zithrans. One serves as a memorial for the lost, the other serves as a warning for the proud. Together, they are a permanent testament to what happens when arrogance collides with an unyielding defense, and a symbol of our hope that someday we won't need such grim reminders. With those words, the ceremony concluded. The fleets of starships broke formation and vanished into warp, leaving the silent giants to stand guard over the invisible line where 300 warships had simply ceased to be. The decades rolled by. The galaxy continued its chaotic dance. New powers emerged while old empires faded into history. But the glowing boundary marking Earth's solar system never flickered. It became a permanent feature of the cosmos. Galactic trade routes were remapped to give it a wide berth, and old, grizzled starship captains would point it out to rookie pilots while telling them a very serious story. Imagine being told that a fleet larger than anything you've ever seen is on its way to your home, and their only goal is to wipe you off the map. That's the corner humanity was backed into. But what they did next wasn't just a surprise counterattack. It was an act that broke the laws of physics and sent a permanent chill down the spine of the entire galaxy. If you think you know stories about underdog victories, stick around, because you've never heard one like this. At Earth's military academies, cadets don't study the Zithran incident as a victory. They study it as a horror story. They learn how the exclusion net was built in secret, a weapon not of destruction, but of non-existence. They learn of its terrifying success and its soul-crushing cost. 500,000 lives vanished in a heartbeat, a galactic empire collapsing overnight, and a new reputation for humanity as the quiet species you never, ever threaten. The final exam has one question. Knowing the outcome, would you have activated the net? Most cadets focused on the 50 years of peace that followed, write yes. A few, believing a better way had to exist, write no. But the instructors are looking for the ones who truly grasp the nightmare of that choice, the students who write just 3 simple words. I don't know. All 3 answers get a perfect score. Decades later, a young historian finally tracked down one of the last surviving engineers from the project. The engineer was old and frail, living out her days in a quiet home far from the corridors of power. The historian approached the subject carefully. Do you ever regret it? She asked softly. Creating something that absolute? The old woman was silent for a full minute, her eyes lost in a memory 50 years old. Every single day, she finally whispered, her voice trembling slightly. And at the same time, not for a single second. It's always both. Seeing the historian's confusion, she explained, we knew we were making a terrible gamble. It was a coin toss. On one side, we save our people. On the other, we lose our soul. We were desperate, so we flipped the coin, and we won the first bet. We bought our children safety. We bought them a future. But the price was our galaxy's trust. We became the monsters in the dark. We are feared, yes, but we are utterly and completely alone. But you'd do it again? The historian pressed. The engineer's eyes met hers, clear and unwavering. Yes, because every other option was just a countdown to our extinction. We chose to be one terrifying lesson instead of 1,000 forgotten tragedies. The simulation said we made the right call, but a computer doesn't have to live with the ghosts of 500,000 names. That powerful interview was the heart of a book titled simply, The Warning. It became a bestseller on hundreds of worlds, a mandatory text for every diplomat and general. Its message was clear. The day the Zithran Armada vanished wasn't just a battle. It was the day the galaxy was violently forced to grow up. It revealed that the ultimate defense could be far more terrifying than any weapon of attack. But the book's final chapter wasn't about tactics. It was called The Price of Peace. It told the story of the scout ship Cassandra, whose crew flew a final, desperate mission to deliver a warning they knew would be ignored. It remembered the Zithran soldiers, most of them just kids following orders who flew confidently into nothingness. It spoke of the families on both sides who were left waiting forever, and the crushing weight carried by every person who had a hand in flipping that final switch. As the historian wrote in the closing pages, the question was never about our right to defend ourselves. The real question is what kind of universe we want to live in. One where we respect each other's space out of fear, or one where we do it out of a shared belief that we all deserve to exist. Humanity's desperate choice gave us the first. The old way of thinking, that the biggest bully with the biggest ships always wins, died that day. A new rule was written across the stars. Push someone far enough, and they might just invent a way to make attacking them an act of self-erasure. The galaxy is still a complicated place, filled with arguments and rivalries. But the fundamental rules of engagement were changed forever. And it all goes back to a single, unspoken message that hangs at the edge of human territory like an invisible wall. Stay out. 2 words that taught the entire galaxy a lesson it has never dared to forget. On Earth, hidden in a quiet memorial garden, a single monument of polished black stone tells the human side of the story. It's covered not with the names of soldiers, but with the names of the scientists, the engineers, the programmers, and the leaders who made the impossible choice. Beneath the thousands of names, a single line is carved into the stone. We did what we had to. Let history be our judge and pray for a day when such choices are no longer necessary. Today, countless ships travel between the stars in an era of unprecedented peace. And every single one of them carefully plots a course that leaves a wide, respectful berth around a quiet, yachty patch of space where 300 warships once confidently charged ahead and were simply deleted from the universe. The warning holds. The border is absolute. The galaxy finally learned to listen.